Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf contains two Mishnayos, begins with one, contains another one, and it ends just at the beginning of the last one. The subject is making sure that you have people in your carbon Pesach who are able to eat it. A carbon is puzzle without eaters, and somebody has to have a carbon that he signed up to that he could eat. So the first Mishnah discusses a group of people that are a suffix whether they will be allowed to or able to eat from the carbon at night. And then the second Mishnah discusses a number of cases where you should not rely on certain scenarios to assume you'll have a kosher carbon. So the first Mishnah says that there are 5 examples of people that should not have a carbon just for them, because they may end up not being able to eat from it. And they are an oinen, that is somebody who has a close relative who died and has not been buried yet. Rashi explains an oinen is generally not allowed to eat from kachim, but he's allowed to eat the carbon pesach because aninus, the status of being an oinen, does not exist at night. It's only during the day. So at night he'll be able to eat the carbon. So even though he couldn't eat it during the day, at night is fine. But he may become tamei because he will need to be involved in the burial of the person who died. He may very well become tamei and not be able to eat it. So therefore, do not make a carbon just for him, lest it end up being a carbon without any eaters. Second case is somebody who's searching amongst the rubble. There might be people in there who are alive or dead. If the person happens to be dead, then he's tamei himself. Now, therefore, you are allowed to include him in a carbon, and if he turns out to be tar, for example, if the person was alive, then he's okay. But if the person wasn't alive, then he became tamei, and therefore the carbon would be problematic because there's nobody else to eat it. So make sure he's not the only person signed up to a carbon. Same applies to someone who's in jail but has a promise that he'll be let out. You can sign him up. He'll be able to eat at night if he gets out. Don't depend on it. Just in case he doesn't get out, have other people signed up to the carbon. And a sick person and an old person are also listed because very often their sickness or their frailty of age becomes worse with short notice, and they may become unable to eat from the carbon when it comes time to eat it at night, and therefore you'll end up having a carbon without eaters. You don't want that to happen. So this is the halach for all of them. Now, in all of these cases, if a psul ends up happening and they don't get a chance to eat, they do not have to bring Pesach Sheni, because at the time of Shechita and Zrika, they weren't signed up to the carbon. If something happens and they can't eat it, okay, but the Eved eating is not ma'akev, you're still yet to the mitzvah as long as you were signed up. The one exception to that is the person who was searching amongst the rubble, and it turns out that the person he was looking for in there happened to be dead. He definitely became tamei because he was over the airspace of that person. He got Tumas Oel, and therefore he was tamei at the time of Shechita, and he has to do a Pesach Sheni. Okay, the Gemara now discusses some qualifications on these cases that we've seen about the halacha that you shouldn't sign them up themselves. So it says that somebody you shouldn't sign up alone to his own carbon if he's in jail with a promise to be let out only applies if he's in a jail of non-Jews. If he's in a Jewish prison, if they promise to let him out, then they're going to, like the pasuk says, if your Jew promises he's going to let you out, he's going to let you out. You could assume it. You don't have to be afraid you'll end up not being able to eat from the carbon. It says even if it's a guy, there's a situation which and that's if the prison is inside Yerushalayim, because then you could sneak him some carbon Pesach, he'll be able to eat even if he's in jail. It's only if he's outside Yerushalayim, you won't be able to get him out of jail, and you won't be able to get the carbon Pesach to him, because it's not allowed to leave Yerushalayim, and he's for sure not allowed to eat it outside Yerushalayim. Okay, then we talked about the mound of rubble. So we had said that if the person was searching amongst the mound and he finds that the person in there was dead, he was tamei all along, and he has to bring up Pesach Sheni. Says the Gemara, it's only true if it was a round mound, meaning that he was all over the surface of the mound when he was looking. If, however, it's a long, stretched out, thin mound of rubble, then it could be that the dead body was found at one end, and he was on the other end, and he never became tamei at all. Now, although it's a suffix, the halach is you can't bring a Pesach Sheni misafik, because if you are not chayav in it, it's chulin lazara, like we've seen. And therefore you wouldn't be able to bring a Pesach Sheni at all. We don't know whether you're mechuyev or not, and therefore you can't bring one. Says the Gemara, there's a brisa which says this way as well. It says that sometimes a searcher in a mound has to bring Pesach Sheni, sometimes not. What's the difference? Depends whether it was long or it was thin. Okay, next Mishnah. Mishnah discusses the value of the individual versus the congregation when you're bringing a carbon. So the Tanna Kama holds you should not have any individual signed up to a carbon at all. Maybe something will happen to the guy and you'll end up with no eaters. You should always have a group. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yaisi says, no, it doesn't go by how many, just as long as you have one eater that's good enough is okay. One individual you could sign up as long as they'll be able to eat. And even if you have 100 people, if they can't eat, it's not going to help you. We don't care about the number. Just make sure you have at least one person signed up who's going to be able to eat from the group. The Mishnah adds, do not make a group comprised only of women, only of avadim, or only of children. And the Gemara will explain why. The Gemara begins by quoting a brisa which spells out the sources of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaisi's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda again says you should not shecht a carbon Pesach for just one individual. His source is from the pasuk that says Leisucha l'zbarach es haPesach b'chad sharecha. You should not shecht a carbon Pesach on one of your gates. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you read it as Leisucha l'zbarach es haPesach b'chad. You should not shecht it for one person alone. That's the proof you shouldn't shecht it for one individual. Rabbi Yaisi disagrees. He has a pasuk that says Ish lefi achlei techaysu al hashay. Ish lefi achlei, a man according to his eating techaysu al hashay, you can shecht the animal. So you see, even for one person you can shecht. Okay, the Gemara asks, how is Rav Shimon going to understand? How is Rav Yaisi going to understand the pasuk brought by Rabbi Yehuda? It does say Leisuch l'zbarach es haPesach b'chad. So Gemara says he will say that that's talking about a different issue entirely. That's talking about bringing the carbon Pesach on a bama. That's a private mizbeach that's not in the Beis Hamikdash, but a small bama that just belongs to one individual. How do you know that that is aser? Now Rashi explains that generally, if you were to do that correctly in the right time, if you were to do the carbon Pesach on the bama in the correct time for bringing the carbon, it would be kares. We're talking about where it's the wrong time. There's no kares, but how do you know that there is a lav? There's an iser anyway. So that's a mirlos suchal azbach es ha pesach be'achad. You can't do it on the bama belonging to one individual. Says the Gemara, this is only true if the era is the time when the bamas are forbidden. That was between the Mishkan. It was before Mishkan Shiloh and between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash. When there was no Beis Hamikdash, the bamas were permitted. This is referring to when there was a Beis Hamikdash. There was a Mishkan. Says the Gemara, when there is a heter to use the bamas, still you're not allowed to bring a carbon Pesach on there. It's only allowed for private karbanos, nedarim, and nedavos. But there is no iser of l'sucha l'zbach, because it says be'achad sha'arecha. That's the phrase be'achad sha'arecha. Says at the time when there is one gate, at the time when everybody's going through a gate, that's when the issur applies. Meaning at the time when the Beis Hamikdash is standing and everybody's going into the gate, that's where it applies this issur specifically, and that's the sources of the Machokes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yaisi. The Gemara now asks a contradiction within the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda himself. In our Mishnah here, we've seen that Rabbi Yehuda says you cannot shecht a carbon Pesach for an individual. Says the Gemara, but Rabbi Yehuda said elsewhere about women. He said that a woman who's chayav in a carbon Pesach Rishon, you can shecht just for her alone. In a carbon Pesach Sheni, which is a reshus, she's permitted to bring one, but she's obligated. She shouldn't have one just for herself. She should have other people that are actually chayav in it along with her. So you see clearly, a woman's allowed to have a carbon Pesach Rishon just for her. Certainly a man could have just for him. So how could you tell me that Rabbi Yehuda says that you're not allowed to have only one person signed up to a carbon? So the Gemara says no, when it says a woman by herself, we don't mean a woman by herself, just one woman. We mean just women, a group of women, and multiple women can have their own group. But for sure, Rabbi Yehuda still holds that one individual can never have his own carbon. The Gemara says, how can you tell me women are allowed to have their own group? The end of the Mishnah said clearly, women, children, and slaves are not allowed to have their own group. The Gemara says, no. They're each allowed to have their own group. The three of them together is a problem. You cannot have a group composed of just women and slaves, because there will be problematic interactions going on there. We're afraid of Avera. You cannot have Avadim and children, because we don't trust the Avadim to be around our children. We're afraid that there'll be issues there also. So those are the problem. You cannot have them together in a group, just these. But individually you can have, women are allowed to have their own group, no problem. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that's what Rabbi Yehuda meant when he said that women are allowed to have their own group for Pesach Rishon by themselves. However, Pesach Sheni, they shouldn't have just their own group, because it's only reshus for them, you should have a man along there who's chayiv. The Gemara now introduces and analyzes a three-way machlokes tanaim as to what the halachic status of women are for Korban Pesach, both for Pesach Rishon and for Pesach Sheni. So the three opinions are as follows. Rav Yosi, the most machmir, says that women are chayiv in a Pesach Rishon, and if they don't do it, in a Pesach Sheni. Rabbi Yehuda takes a split approach. He says they're chayiv in a Pesach Rishon. Pesach Sheni is a rishus. They can bring it if they would like to, if they didn't bring the Pesach Rishon, but they're not chayiv. Those two opinions we've seen so far. Rav Shimon, however, says that women are only rishus in a Pesach Rishon. They're not obligated in a Pesach Rishon. They're permitted to bring one. In a Pesach Sheni, they're not allowed to bring it at all. This means that even if you have other people bringing, you cannot sign them up to one as well. If they're rishus, then you can sign them up if there are other people involved. And in the situation in which they're chiv, you could have them alone, just being the ones there, except according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so these are the three opinions. The Gemara now wants to know the sources. So the Gemara says the source of Pesach Rishon, again, according to Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda, women are chayiv. Where do you see that? So the Gemara says because the pasuk says b'michsas nefashos, plural, all types of souls. Does not differentiate between men and women, so there is a chiyuv on men and women both for Pesach Rishon. Rabbi Shimon says no, there is a pasuk that says ish. So in reference to Pesach Rishon, there is a place where it says ish only, and that excludes women. The Gemara says what's he referring to? The Gemara says, well, maybe he's talking about the pasuk that says v'yikchu lahem ish sel beis avos. You should take each man a lamb. The Gemara says, no, that can't be for that, because that's to teach that you need to be an adult male in order to be able to be mezakeh others, to be able to take it and include others with you. You cannot be a child for that. So that's what that's for. So that can't be what this is for. So Gemara says it's from ish lefi achlei to chaysu al aseh. It says ish lefi achlei. Gemara says, what do you mean? Ish lefi achlei. We said earlier that that is to teach that you can have a single person involved. Ish lefi achlei. It doesn't have to be plural. That was Rabbi Yosi. This is Rabbi Shimon, but the Gemara has shown elsewhere, previously in the Daf, that Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon agree about this. So Gemara says, no, you can learn two things there. If it would have just said lefi achloi, that's lashon yachid, that's the singular form, I would have understood that one person is all you need for a carbon. The fact that it says ish is to exclude women. Okay, so that's how we know Pesach Rishon. Now the question is, what about Pesach Sheni? So here we have a three-way machlokes. So Rabbi Yosi, who says that women are obligated in Pesach Sheni, his pasuk is that it says v'nichrasa hanefesh ahim Yisrael. Somebody who doesn't bring a Pesach Sheni is v'nichrasa hanefesh ahim Yisrael. They'll be cut off. So the Gemara says that is the source that women are obligated. It says nefesh, it doesn't say men, and that includes women. Now, the pasuk here is really referring to Pesach Rishon, but Rashi says there's a drasha that we could split the pasuk in half, and when it says ki, it starts talking about something else, and the second half of the pasuk is actually referring to Pesach Sheni. Okay. Now, so that is Rabbi Yosi's source that women are chayiv. Says Rabbi Yehuda, what is my source that women are not chayiv? It says cheta yisa ishahu. Only ish. Cheta yisa ha'ishahu. That excludes women. So Gemara says, okay, well, how do you know that they are allowed to do it as a rishus? So that's from the phrase kechol chukas Pesach. Yeah, so we say that the Pesach Sheni has all the halachas of Pesach Rishon. That's to add in that women are at least allowed to do it. Now, what does Rabbi Shimon hold? Rabbi Shimon says that they're not allowed to do it. So he, again, uses the same drasha of Chata Yisa Yeshahu. It says ish, it excludes. But he says, we already know that even in Pesach Rishon, according to me, women were only Rishus. So when it adds again, it says ish in Pesach Sheni, what's it referring to there? Must be excluding them even from Rishus, that they can't even do it as Rishus. Okay, now the Gemara quotes the Brisa, and the Gemara wants to know who does it fit with. The Brisa itself is a little funny. The Brisa says, Rabbi Elazar, it quotes, it says, Isha Barishon Chova B'Sheni Rishus. A woman is obligated in the first Pesach, Rishus in the second Pesach. That sounds like Rabbi Yehuda, but then it says, and it pushes away Shabbos. It says, if it's only Rishus, how could it push away Shabbos? You can't do it on Shabbos if it's only optional. It says, no, when it says it pushes away Shabbos, it's going back on the Pesach Rishon. You read it as follows, B'Sheni Rishus, Barishon Chova V'Dochas HaShabbos. Now, who does that fit with? The Gemara says, well, obviously that fits with Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, now the Gemara quotes one other halacha here. The Gemara says you should not have a group of people bringing a carbon Pesach that is only Geirim, because Geirim tend to be nervous about the halacha, they're new to it, and therefore they're extra machmir, and when people are extra machmir in a carbon, they end up making psul in it for no reason, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, now the Gemara quotes the Brisa. The Brisa says as follows. The Gemara will try to explain it. It's a bit confusing. The Gemara will end up saying who it fits with. The Gemara says, the Brisa says, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror are obligatory in Rishon, in the first day, and the rest of the days they're only Rishus. The Gemara says, okay, how does this make sense? The rest of the days are only Rishus. There is no Korban Pesach the rest of the days. So it's obviously referring to Matzah and Maror. Then the next line in the Brisa quotes Rav Shimon, who says, no, it's not so. It's obligatory for men, and it's rishus for women. Now, how do you understand that? If we're talking about matzah and maror, it's not obligatory only for men in the first day. Matzah is obligatory for women as well. We know that because the Torah says, "Lo sachal of chametz shevet yom techal of matzos." It links the Isser to eat chametz to the mitzvah to eat matzah. Anybody who's Asur to eat chametz is obligated to eat matzah on the first night, and that's women are included in that. Women are Asur to eat chametz, and therefore they're also obligated to eat matzah. So how could he say that it's only a rishus? So the Gemara says no. He was actually, when he says that it's obligatory for men and rishus for women, he's going back on Pesach, on the Pesach phrase. So the Brisa is a little funny. It says Pesach, matzah, and maror are obligatory the first day. Matzah and maror are rishus the second day. Says Rabbi Shimon, that which you said Pesach is obligatory the first day, that's only men. For women on the first day, even Pesach is a rishus.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.